Hello everybody and welcome into my latest live video. Today it is the 26th of July 2022. It's Tuesday. My name is CareyHolzman, a professional working PC technician in the industry for over 30 years, and I'm here to share my experience, my knowledge, my mistakes, and the new things I learn with all of you today. You, I hope, will be a part of today's show. If you join us in our live chat and you have an issue, a problem with your computer, your networking, or you're curious about how something is done, please join us in the chat and ask your question in the chat. And I will read these questions aloud and I will do my best to provide an answer. So I have no idea what today's content is going to be, since I don't know what questions you're going to ask or how many of you will participate. But on my shows, I like the audience to be a part of the show as much as possible. And so it's as much your show as it is mine. And it requires your participation if you want to be a part of it. You are all welcome and invited, provided you're sincere, you're supportive, you're nice, that you're not trying to create a problem. We would love to hear from you during today's live broadcast. I very much enjoy interacting with the audience. We have an amazing community here, and I hope if you're new to this channel or this is the first time you've ever seen me, I hope you'll see the community that we have and want to be a part of it, because we have plenty of room for other like-minded folks to join us, and I would like nothing more than to see this community blossom and flourish. Today, I'm broadcasting on the new Canon XF705 camera, made possible by the community. This is a 4K broadcast. I warned everybody early on when I got the camera that things were going to be a little rough as I figure out the camera settings optimized for what I'm doing with my lighting, with YouTube. And we really ran into some bizarre issues on the last broadcast regarding some weird shuttering effect when I'd move my hand. And I'll tell you a little bit about that problem, but I hope you have a very vivid image that is color correct. I think I have it, I'm not going to say perfected and dialed in, but I feel like I'm very close. We had some issues when I first went to 4K with the stream only offering it in 2K, and that turned out where I was focused on the OBS software settings and the camera settings turned out to be a YouTube studio setting. So it was something I had already known and just forgot. And then when I was reminded of it, I was like, oh yeah, I remember this. So let me know what you think of today's color clarity. You should be seeing a 4K option, and I tuned the audio a little bit. We might work on that a little bit more with feedback from you. With the air conditioner noise in the background, it's you know, I can use something like the RTX noise suppression, which is very effective. However, it will literally block everything but my voice. So when I'm using my electric screwdriver, you won't hear it. So there's certain background sounds I do want. The only one I don't want is that air conditioner sound. And the noise suppression isn't really how I'm going to get there, but rather through filtering out a certain frequency, which I won't do today, but we can still play around with the audio a little bit if we want to. So let me know what you guys think of the audio and video quality, if you think it looks sharp, if the colors look vivid. I hope this camera has a bit more depth. I've done a little research on the camera before I bought it, and there were two flagship Canon camcorders that were of interest to me. The Canon XF705 and the XF605. Now the 605 is cheaper, and as it turns out, the 605 is a newly released camera, and the 705 was released in December of 2018 and costs about $1,500 more. The main difference between the two cameras is this camera, the XF705, its ability to record in It's X265 HEVC compression, which is the latest and greatest compression available to video formats to make the file size smaller, but it requires a lot of processing power. Having done a little research on the XF605, I probably could have purchased the XF605 and basically have the exact same camera for about $1,500 less, and a newer camera, a newer model. It didn't occur to me that Canon would lower the model number of the camera from the previous model. Usually the numbers only get bigger, so when I saw that the 705 was the most expensive, I automatically assumed it was better than the 605 and didn't really look much into the details, but on the surface they look virtually identical. So I thought that was kind of interesting, and I wanted to share that revelation with you. No regrets. I like this camera a lot, but if I were going to get another one, I think I could get away with the 605. Everything else I think is the same, so the color matching and brightness when switching between camera 1 and camera 2 should be much easier. However, I don't need it. I don't want it right now. I have to figure out how to get the absolute best image quality and audio quality out of this camera. And because I've been so busy doing computer repair work, I haven't had a lot of time to fidget around with the camera settings. Now, Photo Ray, who is a professional photographer, did reach out to me and said when I have time, he's more than happy to come over and help me get this camera dialed in. And I do plan on taking him up on that offer, but for right now, I feel like I've got things pretty good, but I do know, I have a strong feeling I can make them better with a little help. Bird in the chat room says, perfect 4K 30 frames per second, fluid motion, colors are perfectly natural. Appreciate the feedback, thank you. And the audio, is the audio good? Vern says, I'm seeing the yellow in the neon sign behind you. Is the HD3 on the motherboard box red or yellow? It's neither. It's neither red nor yellow. The HD3, how would I describe that color? It's the same color of where it says UD here on the box. It almost looks like a, oh, this is a tough one. It's kind of tan, kind of orange. Let me think. How would I describe that color? It's almost like it's a flat, not a glossy, but a flat, that's a tough question. How would I describe that color? You know what? I never thought of that before. I never thought about that particular color. I've looked at it a million times and thought nothing about how unusual it was. I suppose it's almost a, I'm trying to think something else in life that I could compare it to. It looks like maybe a dull peach color. You're gonna have to, it's like a brownish gold. So that's a tough one. Let me chew on that for a little bit, or if you guys are familiar with the color that Gigabyte uses on this board, let me know how you would describe it. The Greek says, looks like I could reach out and take that Gatorade. Yeah. Go ahead and try it. Just try and take my Gatorade. You only try it once. No, good. I'm glad that the picture's that vivid. Pumpkin. Jason says pumpkin. It's not quite pumpkin. I guess it's close. It's like a dull pumpkin. Yeah, I think pumpkin's probably a better description of it, but it's pumpkin's a little more orange. Bronze? No, it's not. I wouldn't call that. Would I call it bronze? No, I wouldn't call it bronze. Rust orange? No, it's not very orange. Copper? Rose gold. I would say it's rose gold color now that you mention it. Yeah, that's what it looks like, rose gold. Creamsicle color, says Cam Blinsky. Winston Liu just became a member of our tech club for 3 months. Let me tell you what the tech club is if you don't know. I'm sure you're already aware of subscriptions. You can subscribe to YouTube channels that you want to see more content from. However, by default, when YouTube doesn't send you any notifications of when the channels that you've subscribed to are posting new content. To do so, you've got to turn notifications on in YouTube. And you would do that next to the subscription button of whatever YouTube channel you're watching. There's a little outline of a bell, and you click that bell to turn notifications on or off. And you would go into your settings of YouTube, which is in the upper right corner. There's a little picture up in the right corner that you've selected as your avatar or your profile photo. And you go under settings and look under how you choose to be notified. So if you don't do all of these steps, then you won't get notifications when new content is posted. Now, it's different on if you're watching YouTube using a computer or versus watching YouTube on a smartphone. And then depending on if it's an iOS-based smartphone or an Android-based smartphone. Because then you have to use the YouTube app on your smartphone, and then you would go into the app settings, which are usually in the settings of your smartphone, and enable notifications. Allow that app, give it permission to alert you, and then you specify how, if you want your phone to beep or vibrate, etc. By default, I don't think any of it's turned on, and so it confuses a lot of people when they want to be notified. However, all of that is free, and it's a little tough to answer the questions about how come I'm not getting notifications, because there's so many variables involved. However, I would encourage you, if you're having an issue receiving notifications, to Google search, why am I not receiving YouTube notifications? Literally type that out. And then when you're looking through the results, pay attention to when the results were posted, because there are instructions about how to fix this issue from last year, the year before, the year before, the year before, and they're all different because YouTube keeps updating the platform and moving things and shifting the layout and what things look like. So, and even changing some of the notification options, such as like email. You don't get emails anymore for notifications. So you can help yourself on that one. And I'm sure the answer is just there. I don't think you're going to have a problem that hasn't already been answered. But when you're looking up information like that, pay particular attention to the date, the age of the information. And if you end up figuring out why you weren't getting notifications, and you fixed it, please share what you did in the chat room anytime you do that, so others who are having a similar problem can resolve it quicker without having to go through the effort of doing a search, because God forbid you have to type something. But it's always interesting as well, especially if I see a pattern of a majority of people having to do the same thing. Then I can at least, as a default, say, try these steps, and if that's not working, then do the search. So help me to help you. Let me know what you've done to resolve any notification issues, if you've had any. Apart from the subscriptions, which again, they're free, there is a membership option. So next to the subscription button, should be a join button, or sometimes there's a drop down where it's subscribe or join. So what join does is that's $9.99 a month, and that's a way of supporting this channel, so I don't have to go and get a bunch of sponsors and have the sponsors tell me what products I'm going to show you and what I'm allowed to say about them. I am a real working technician, and I like to be able to tell you my opinion without fear of losing a sponsor or upsetting a sponsor. So if I just buy a product and review it, I don't have a sponsor, right? You guys would be that sponsor. That being said, I have a handful of sponsors that are companies that I use in my business. Not all the companies I use in my business. The 3 companies that I use and other companies I use in my business, for one reason or another, we've not been able to work out, or they're not interested in sponsoring me. So those 3 companies are RoboForm, a password managing program, which if you've ever used it, if you've never used it and then you try it, you'll wonder how you've lived without it for so long. I've been using that personally since 2005 or before, and I've been using it continually since 2005. So it's a company that's been around a long time. They're reputable. They've never had any hacks or break-ins or anything like that. All of the data is encrypted, so even if somebody did break in and steal the data, it would all be gibberish. Product is also very affordable, and we will be running another special probably close to the holiday season, maybe October, November. And we'll bring Simon back on from RoboForm to talk about all the changes to RoboForm that have happened since when we had him on last. That's the other thing. RoboForm is a subscription service. You pay for it by the year. And by being a viewer here, you get a special discount code nobody else gets. It's for a limited time, usually about 30 days. And the folks over at RoboForm will allow you to buy up to 5 years of a subscription at that. Usually it's half price. It's a heck of a deal. It's a great piece of software, and you can the good thing about subscription software is you can install it on any number of computers or devices. So I have RoboForm on my smartphone, I have it on my laptop, I have it on my streamer, I have it on my desktop, and I don't pay for every installation, I just pay for the one subscription. If there are multiple people in your household and you want each person to have their own RoboForm account, then they have discounts for multiple users, but each user has their own subscription, their own account. They don't have to install their own RoboForm. If you're sharing a computer with your family, then whoever the family member is that's signing into Windows would then sign into their RoboForm account, and then nobody else has access to what their passwords are. If you lose your master password to get into RoboForm, even RoboForm can't get your passwords back. That's how secure it is. Aside from RoboForm, I'm also thrilled to be offering the Acronis imaging and backup cloning software. I've been working with Acronis professionally since 2009. I use them in my business when I do hard drive upgrades, SSD upgrades, and I also use it for image backups. And again, for a limited time, Acronis offers a significant discount to my viewers only. The third and final, of course, is VIP CDK deals. They sell what are essentially gray market Windows and Office keys. There's a lot of concern about the legality of gray market, and what you have to understand about gray market is it's not black market, but what it is it's a Microsoft has terms and policies which primarily are enforceable to people who work at Microsoft. Corporate policies are not, how do I want to phrase this? Not all corporate policies are laws. Some are, I would imagine, but a corporation might have a policy that's unenforceable in a court of law. So Microsoft wants all of their software to be sold through an authorized reseller, so Microsoft can control the price and just have control. And Microsoft's not alone in this. Apple does the same thing. You can't just sell Apple hardware. You've got to be Apple authorized. Certain camera manufacturers, or certainly luxury items like Rolls-Royce or Rolex, they only want those products sold through authorized dealers. But that doesn't mean somebody can't buy those products and resell them. As a result, companies like Amazon can offer products cheaper than the manufacturer wants to sell them at. So for example, there's a company that makes very sharp knives for cooking, food preparation, kitchen knives. There's two that come to mind, Wusthof and Henkel. And I think it was Wusthof didn't like the fact that Amazon was selling the knives below what Wusthof wanted them to be sold for. And the reason was Wusthof wanted to protect, well, this is what they say, they wanted to protect the mom and pop knife shops from going out of business, these specialty stores. If Amazon's selling the same product for less, the mom and pop shop specialty store, there's no way they could offer that discount. They would lose money. And so Wusthof was like, you know, we're trying to protect our small businesses here. That's why we do this. There's probably some truth in that, but I don't think it's 100% the reason. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think they took Amazon to court over it, and the judge said, yeah, you can't do that. You know, if somebody wants to sell the knives, right, they can sell them at whatever price they want, even if they want to sell it for less than they paid for them. So what ends up happening is somebody might be an authorized seller of, let's say, Wusthof, and they're buying the knives at wholesale, the same price everybody else pays wholesale, and they're expected to sell those knives at the MSRP and not 1 penny below the manufacturer's suggested retail price, so that they're not putting out of business one seller against another. They don't want to pit their customers against each other. Makes sense. But if one of those authorized resellers, you know, orders a big batch of these knives at the wholesale price, Wusthof doesn't see them sell them. So if that entity has a knife shop and they sell the knives in their knife store, let's just playing with an example here, they can open an account on Amazon to be a seller, and then they can even provide the knives to Amazon warehouse, so Amazon can fulfill the orders. And then the seller can say, I don't need to make that much money on these knives. Instead of a 40% markup, I'll give it a 15% markup. So then somebody shopping for these knives, it's like, these are the same exact knives. This is brand new in the box. They're not imitations or knockoffs. But the price is locked in everywhere you go to buy them, and yet somehow at Amazon they're cheaper. How's that possible? So that's how that happens. So the companies that try to control the price of their product, they get really upset. However, it's not illegal. What the companies will do to punish anybody who buys on this gray market, that's what we would call gray market, is they say that they won't give you any support or honor any warranty because you didn't purchase it through they're not obligated now to you because you didn't buy it through the appropriate chain. So in that example, if we attribute that now to Microsoft Windows and Microsoft Office licenses, there are lots of people online that sell these licenses. You can go on eBay. Now, eBay doesn't actually allow the licenses for sale, but if you see one for sale and you buy it, more than likely that seller account will be immediately closed. And the sellers won't have a lot of feedback because of that. They don't stick around. They have to keep creating new accounts. And if you have a problem with either the product code they send you not working, or the product isn't exactly what they said it was, like maybe you wanted Windows 10 Pro, and then when you activated it with the key you bought off eBay, it activates Windows 10 Workstation. And you're like, well, there's no recourse for you. PayPal won't guarantee or refund your money, eBay won't help you, and the seller's account is closed, so good luck reaching the seller. Also, you don't know when you buy from places like that if the keys were stolen, but more importantly, you have no peace of mind. So VIP CDK Deals is a large organization based in Hong Kong, and they've been around, I think, nearly 2 decades, certainly more than 1 decade. And they offer these gray market OEM keys, but they don't provide you with the installation software. They tell you how to go to Microsoft and get it fully legal. You're not hacking anything. And then when you install that version for the product key that you purchased, then you put your product key in, and it activates no differently than if you bought the key directly from Microsoft at more than 15 times the cost. So where does the difference lie? The difference lies in that Microsoft probably won't help you if you have a problem. Like you're having an issue with Microsoft Word and you want to call Microsoft for help, and then they look up your product key and they say you have an OEM product key. They don't know that it's gray market or not, only that it's OEM. OEM keys are discounted to PC manufacturers on the condition that the PC manufacturer will do all the support and Microsoft will do no support. Support is very expensive, so Microsoft can sell the software key cheaper knowing that they have no expense following the sale, that the PC manufacturer absorbs that expense. So right there you save money from the retail. OEM also doesn't have a box, instructions, or media. Generally speaking, when you go to the store to buy a copy of software, you're buying something that you're picking up off a shelf, and you take it to the cash register and you check out with it. And that's what we call retail. Retail's more expensive because they got to pay for the box, they got to pay for the distribution of shipping that box to the store. The store is going to sell it at MSRP. The store is going to handle the transaction, and the software is in the box. But more and more, it's always better to download the software. Even if the software came in the box, you don't know how long that software has been sitting there on the shelf before you bought it. So rather than installing an outdated piece of software or version of that software, even if you were to buy the retail box version, it is always advisable to actually download the software from the manufacturer to get the latest version, and it should still activate the same with the key, the product key that's in that box. If you want to reinstall the software, and for any reason it doesn't reactivate, you can always call the company for support. When you purchase one of these Windows or Office OEM gray market keys, like I said, apart from it activating the first time, which they guarantee, VIP CDK Deals guarantees their keys will work to activate once. And that product will stay activated until, let's say you bought a new PC, or you're going to reformat and reinstall Windows. The way Microsoft handles Windows product keys versus Office product keys is quite different. When you activate a Windows product key, regardless of whether it's OEM or retail, regardless if it's home or pro, the Microsoft activation servers, when you activate over the internet, they identify the unique hardware of your machine. Every machine has different serial numbers, and Microsoft has come up with a way to take the serial numbers of the hardware and come up with a code, a long code, so no two are ever the same. And when you activate that Windows license key, in the background, and trust me, you don't know this is happening, it doesn't tell you what it's doing because they don't want people to pirate their software and figure out how to emulate this system. The Microsoft servers take that code and the unique identifier of your machine and tie them together. So if you ever have to reformat and reinstall Windows 10 or Windows 11, you never have to enter the product key again. After you've installed Windows 10 or Windows 11 with no product key, you would simply go to Windows Update to get your updates. Microsoft Updates will recognize, it'll read the unique hardware identifier. That is only you. There's no two alike. And they will reassign the product key back to you and reactivate the Windows. And they don't tell you any of this is happening. It won't say, for example, Windows is activated. It just won't tell you. As far as you know, you're just going to Windows Update and checking for updates. After you check for updates, download your updates, do your first restart, it should just automatically be activated even though you entered no product key. That's the same for the retail version as the OEM version, the same for the gray market keys. Now, Microsoft Office doesn't work that way. Sometimes. Microsoft is wanting you to create a Microsoft account for Office 2019, Office 2021, Office 365. Now, Office 365 is a monthly license, monthly subscription. And the monthly subscription means that you can install it, I don't know on how many computers. There's probably a limit, but I don't know what it is. And of course, you have support at all times. And because it's online, it's always updated. You don't have to do any updates. It does it basically on its own. Office 2021 is software you install, but Microsoft's requiring you to use your Microsoft account to associate to that product key. The benefit of doing this is that should you have to reinstall, once you sign into your Microsoft account, it should auto-activate on a fresh install. I don't like using Microsoft accounts, me personally. So I like to install software with a product key that I can just activate without an account. So the latest version of Office I was using was 2019 because that was the last version where I could still do that. But now I've learned Microsoft has changed that and they're requiring a Microsoft account. When I build computers for my clients, I like them, I like the computer to turn on and boot right to the Windows desktop with all the updates, drivers, and activations done. I don't know any system builder that does that. Certainly the big manufacturers do not do this. So if you buy a brand new computer at Best Buy, you'll be sitting for a few hours waiting on updates and answering a bunch of questions and such. It's just a service I offer. I can do something they can't do. If I have to use a Microsoft account to activate software on behalf of the customer, then I need the customer to tell me what their Microsoft account information is. And if they don't have a Microsoft account, then I need to create one for them. It's free. If you use Skype, then you have a Microsoft account already. The problem now is when the computer boots up, it requires you to enter your Microsoft account password before it will go to the desktop. I don't like that. However, there's no other way for me to activate Office 2019 or Office 2021. So by creating the Microsoft account and tying the product to that for activation, now Windows is always going to require that login. Windows will offer you, once you've set up the username and password for your Microsoft account, you have the option that instead of entering your Microsoft account password at the Windows login, instead to create a unique PIN. So you can just enter a 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 digit number and sign in much faster. But regardless, for me personally, I don't like that. It has other advantages, and this is the way things are going. So, I better start getting used to it and figuring out how we're going to do this going forward. It may be that I just can't activate any software I can activate Windows, but I may not be able to activate Office for my customers anymore. I might just have to install Office for them, and then they can use the key and they can go through the steps. Another difference between Microsoft Windows and Microsoft Office in the way that they handle activations is in Microsoft Windows, when you activate Windows, it stays tied to the motherboard, right? In Microsoft Office, sorry, I didn't finish my thought. In Microsoft Windows, if we don't enter a product key, if we basically put it in trial mode, Windows essentially doesn't hold anything back. Some customizations, there's some little tiny things you can't do until you activate, but for the most part, you could continue to use Windows 10 and even Windows 11 indefinitely without activation. You'll have like this little annoying writing on your screen that will say Windows is not activated, and it'll keep bothering you to activate. But apart from that, it works. Microsoft Office, on the other hand, you can, just the same as we can go to Microsoft and download the installation for Windows, we can also download the installation for the version of Office we want, 2016, 2019, 2021, home and student version, professional, professional plus, et cetera, et cetera. When you do that and you don't enter a product key, the trial of Microsoft Office is only 5 days. So if you don't enter a product key to activate the product within 5 days, that when you start any of the Office apps, the activation window opens and says you've got to complete your activation and you can't bypass it. So after 5 days, it won't start Word or Outlook or Excel or Access or PowerPoint or whatever Office application you're wanting to run. It will instead bring up the activation screen and you will have to activate it. During the first 5 days, you can say, I want to cancel and do this later, and it will let you use Office, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, et cetera, just as you would if it were activated. After 5 days, it won't, the cancel option is gone. So if I install Microsoft Office on a build for a customer, and I send it to them and they can activate it, by the time they get the machine, it'll probably take 5 or 6 days just for FedEx to deliver it, especially if they're on the East Coast. Then it already would have been past the trial period. They don't get any trial period, which sucks. So that's the only concern about the product keys is pretty much during a reinstall. When you're installing Microsoft Office, again, no matter what version it is, and you bought your product key from VIP CDK deals, if you have any issues with Microsoft saying the key isn't valid or something like that, VIP CDK deals guarantees their keys and they have product support. And they will verify, they have a way of checking if the key is valid or not. And if they say, hey, the key is valid, you're doing something wrong, that's on you. But if the key is not valid, they can confirm that and they will send you another key. Here's the rub. If you buy this software key and then you end up upgrading your computer, replacing it or reinstalling, and you try to use that key again for Microsoft Office, it might or might not activate. And VIP CDK deal says we won't help you with that. We're only guaranteeing that it activates and will stay activated unless you try to reinstall it. It might reactivate if you try to reinstall it. It might not, but either way, we're not helping you with that. And the reason, when you think about it, it costs money to pay for support. And they don't know if you're pirating the software, you're trying to install it on a second computer because, maybe you're trying to buy the license once and then use it on 10 computers. So that's problem number one. How do we know your request is sincere with so many scammers? Problem number two is the software for like Microsoft Office 2019, at Microsoft it costs $460, and VIP CDK deals will sell that exact same software product code for under $50, like $46, $47. So you could buy Office 2019, well, let's just say it's $50 and it's $450, so you could buy it 9 times. If you had to reinstall and pay for another license key, you'd have to do that 9 times before you'd meet the price of one license from Microsoft. So even if you had to buy another key, you're still saving a ton of money. But I just want to make sure you understand the difference, why the key is costs less money, or why the key costs more money, and to set your expectations accordingly so that you're not disappointed. One of the reasons that I love Acronis so much is that this is never a concern for me or my customers either way. Once they have the Windows and Office and all their other software activated, and we're finished with configuring the new computer and everything's good to go, we do a backup image using Acronis, and that backs up the activations essentially. Not for everything, but certainly for Office and such. So if we ever have to replace something, we don't have to go through the whole process of reinstalling, which is very time consuming, along with all the updates and drivers and optimizations and activations. In like 10 minutes, we can restore the original image and all those activations are back in, unless the hardware changes. If the hardware changes, it looks to be piracy. So a lot of those activations, even on an image restore, will either require buying new licenses or going through support to get the licenses reactivated. So depending on what you're expecting, don't expect the same exact kind of product activation process that a retail key that costs 9 times more is going to be offered on the same software key sold through OEM channels or gray market. You're paying, what is that, 15% of the retail price? And the reason you're able to save that money is you're on your own for the support, and if you want to reinstall it and for any reason it does not reactivate, you'll need to spend to buy another product key again. But even then, even if you bought 2 product keys, you're still only at 30% of the retail price. If you had to do it 4 times, you're at 60%. You're still ahead of the game. You're still saving a ton of money, but it's that you're going to help yourself. Apart from that initial purchase, if you have an issue during the initial purchase for the first 30 days, you reach out to the folks at VIP CDK Deals, and they will make it right. And if they don't, you send me an email, tell me about your situation, and I'll make it right. You're not taking the risks you will take when you buy software keys from places like eBay or other websites. So for that peace of mind. On the other hand, if you don't want the peace of mind and you want to roll the dice, you can certainly find product keys even less and just hope for the best. You know, that's your choice. All I want to do is let you know what the differences are and to set your expectations so you won't be disappointed. Thomas Robinson has contributed £4. Thank you, Thomas. Joe Rogaine contributes $10. He says, hello, my apartment comes with wall outlets in every room for Ethernet hookups, but none of them work. Do you know if that's up to my ISP or the apartment management to fix, or can I do it myself? Well, Joe, that's a good question. If it's not your building, so in other words, if you have an office you're leasing, or if you have an apartment you're renting, or a house, if those connections were hooked up, you should be concerned. Because if you don't know where they're going, where's the other end, then how do you know somebody else in the building isn't also on it and can eavesdrop on all of your network traffic? I mean, that's a major privacy concern. What it sounds like is that they pre-wired Ethernet for some reason in the apartment. And all that Ethernet terminates somewhere. It may not terminate, in other words, where the other end of the cable goes, every room has a cable, you say. But the other end of the cable from every room all goes to the same location. That may not be in your apartment. It may not be something you have access to, and it may not be functional. So you have to ask the people at the apartment. There's no one steady rule for that. And again, if you don't have access to where those cables are all going, I wouldn't use it. If the apartment complex says, yeah, that all runs into a maintenance room and our janitor or custodian or whatever can hook it up for you, what else is he hooking up? What else is already there? How would you know? So you could be spied on all your network traffic and everything. So yeah, you definitely want to make sure that you, if you're going to use those Ethernet jacks in those rooms, that you know where the other end is going and you have control over it. That not only that, only you, that it's not in a shared space where other tenants have access. Nobody but you should have access to where those cables terminate, and they will terminate into perhaps a network switch, router, whatever. And that way, the only time any cable is or connection is being added to your network is if you do it. Otherwise, again, how would you know? It's some pretty serious stuff. Generally speaking, as long as it's an apartment, it's a place that you don't own, in most cases, you probably aren't going to be using that. I wouldn't plan on it. If you end up getting a house and you want to put the time and effort into cabling it and hooking it up, then you install it the way you want it with the equipment you're going to use, and you control it, and it's completely secure. So food for thought there. But yeah, you could ask your apartment manager and ask them where those cables terminate or what those Ethernet jacks are for, how they're intended to be used. You know, where do they go? See what they tell you. Thank you for the question. Thank you for your contribution. I'm going to scroll through here. Madi Yoel with $10 says, hello, Carey and chat. Hey, Madi, good to see you, my friend. Thank you for your continued support. Winston Liu has become a supporter, a member of the channel. Thank you, Winston. And Winston contributes $1. $1 Canadian. Jamie wants to know if I'm broadcasting over Wi-Fi. That's yes and no. Everything here in the building is hardwired, but the source of the internet is coming through a Wi-Fi bridge. So this computer is hardwired to a router. Also hardwired to the router is a bridge located in another room, and that bridge is receiving a signal from another bridge in another building. So yes and no. That's technically, I suppose it would be yes, but we aren't using typical Wi-Fi. The bridge has its own Wi-Fi spectrum or band that it broadcasts and receives on, so it's less likely to receive the interruptions and interference of a consumer router. James Prezi with $5 says, I've tested positive for COVID today. I get to miss work and stay home. At least I'll be able to check out today's live video. Thanks for all you do. Well, James, I'm sorry to hear you're sick, but thank you for the contribution, and maybe we can keep you distracted for a little while. Hopefully it's not too bad. There's Kelly Stewart joining us. I see Marvin Jameson is in the chat room. Good to see you, Marvin, as well as Patrick Roussaw and John Powell. Marco Melstrom in our chat room. Good to see you, Marco. A1 Computers says hello in our chat room. Hope you guys are checking out the chat room, especially if you're new here. It's the friendliest community. Everybody's always welcome. Even if you're not a social person, just pop in and say hello. You won't regret it. Madi says, Carey, read my chat. I don't know what chat you're referring to. Rather than telling me, you could help me out by, instead of copying and pasting Carey, read my chat, copy and paste what it is you want me to read, because I don't know what you want me to read. That's just too generic. And for the amount of effort it takes to say read my chat, it's the same effort to simply copy and paste. If I'm not seeing your question, you'll have to copy and paste it or ask it again. The chat can move pretty quickly. It's saying, please answer my earlier question or please read my previous chat. I have no idea what you're talking about. So you would help me out a lot to simply repeat the original thing you wrote rather than tell me to go and read the original thing you wrote, because I don't know what the original thing you wrote is. And the chat, I don't get the entire history of chat. As we continue on and time ticks forward and more people leave messages, there's a certain amount that YouTube allows at any given time, a certain number of messages. And then once that amount fills, the oldest messages get wiped out. They're gone. There's no way for me to go back. So yeah, you just simply would retype or recopy and paste what your question is or comment, something you want me to see. It can be very difficult to see everything that's happening, especially while I'm in the midst of answering a question and the chat continues to move. So that would help me out a lot. Jimmy Munoz with a $2 contribution says, I can't remember if you're broadcasting over Wi-Fi. So yeah, I think we just answered that. There's Reverend John O'Toole saying hello. The Greek likes RoboForm. William McDonald says, hello, Uncle Carey and everyone. Hey, William, welcome in. Thomas Robinson says, Carey, is there a Windows 13 in the future? Only Microsoft knows. There's rumors of Windows 12 next year, but they're just rumors. I imagine sooner or later there'll be a Windows 13. A lot of times companies skip the number 13 and they go over to the next number, 14. Just like in you might see that in a tall building, there's no 13th floor. I don't know. I have no idea. At this point, we don't even know if the Windows 12 rumor is true or valid. And it really doesn't make a difference if it is or it isn't, to be honest, because there's nothing you can do with that information. In other words, you can't prepare for something that you don't know what it is. So generally speaking, the technology will always keep improving and evolving, and marketing companies will always do something to the name of the product to entice consumers, to convince them this is not the same product it was. This is now a new product. And they do that by giving it a new name. And then people say, oh, I want the new thing or whatever. So eventually, yeah, there probably will be. But again, even if we knew the answer to that, there's nothing you can do with that information that would benefit you in any way. You wouldn't be able to prepare for it. You wouldn't be able to save for it. You wouldn't be able to build a machine for it, because we have no idea what it would require. We don't know when it would be released. And we don't know if any of us will be around when that happens. So you might be, preparing for something that eventually happens, but after you've gone, after you've moved on to the next plane, Les Stevenson says, good morning, Carey, from a warm Toronto in Ontario, Canada. Hi, Les. Le Saxon contributes 10 pounds and says, I'm currently suffering with COVID a third time, but your streams always keep me perked up. Cheers, Carey. Well, that sucks. Third time, my goodness. I hope you feel better soon. Thank you for the contribution. I'm going to make sure that you're blue in here. Jason Willis says you can do 6 installs for Microsoft Office 365. I do hope that you'll interact with me. I'm looking through the chat to see if there's any questions or comments that I can answer. I do like to include my viewers to be a part of the show. But if you don't participate in the chat, there's no way I can have you be a part of the show. It's up to you. So I hope you'll take me up on the offer here and participate in our chat during today's live stream. Rusty says he's got an Asus motherboard, but he doesn't tell us what the make and model of, well, he doesn't tell us the model of motherboard. So that's problem number one. If you want a very specific answer to your questions, you'll need to be very specific with the question. So if you're going to just be vague and say, my motherboard is this or that, how do I fix it? Nobody can be anything but equally vague in return unless we know specifically what's the make and model of the board. But Rusty says that he's got a BIOS version of 1801 on his Asus board from 2017. And Asus shows the latest version is 2101, but when he tries to update via the internet, it tells him that his BIOS is up to date. Usually that will happen if the internet checking isn't kept up to date, or if the 2101 BIOS is beta. So you would update the BIOS the way I show, which is to go to the Asus support page, download the BIOS file, put it on a flash drive, and not update via the internet, but rather to update via a flash drive. If it's still not updating, you're probably trying to install the wrong BIOS and you don't realize that there's some minor difference in the model name and you don't realize that. Even that happens to me. Dustin Fuller joins us in the chat and says hello. Ben Fitzpatrick has a question for us here in the chat. He says, good evening, Carey. My question is, I have a Lenovo Legion 5. I've mistakenly wiped the NVMe drive with Linux and lost its recovery partition, and Lenovo has a download of the stock OS. Should I get that or vanilla Windows 10? Really, that's up to you, Ben. If you brought the machine to me and asked me to put Windows back on it, I'm going to put Windows 10 on it the way you always see me put Windows 10 on it. I'm not going to use the manufacturer's version because it's going to be well out of date. It's going to take forever to update. And usually, whatever the manufacturer is doing with recovery partitions and such, the customers never use it. They often don't know it's there. And we just use the recovery partitions that are default part of Windows 10. So my suggestion to you would be to do a regular Windows 10 install on it. And if there's something that's missing that you use and you miss, now you know. Go get the install from Lenovo and do that from now on. So that's one of those things I can't answer for you. You'll have to experience it. The good news is to try that is free, and because you've already wiped it out, you've got nothing to risk by trying, and then see if you notice any difference or if you have a preference. But it is a preference, and what you may think is fine, somebody else may not. So you're going to have to decide for yourself. Tom Argentini joins us in the chat and says hello. Alex says, what's your opinion with Windows 11 on unsupported hardware? Basically, as a professional computer technician with liability and accountability, I would be putting myself in financial jeopardy to work on any customer's unsupported operating systems. If it results in any financial loss from the customer, they would have a right to sue me. So what individuals at home do is entirely up to them. For that matter, what individual businesses do is entirely up to them. Generally speaking, businesses have a different attitude than the home consumer because they have so much more to lose. So you can do whatever you want, I don't care. But as for my business, if you had called for service and I find out you're running Windows 7 or you're running Windows 11 on unsupported hardware, I would just let you know that I cannot work on that and you'll have to find somebody else. Fred Sunderman said, I'm currently using Office 2019, but I'm curious about the open source versions of Office competitors like OpenOffice and LibreOffice. The good news is, Fred, you can download those for free and use them. You don't have to uninstall Office to try those other free Office alternatives. You can have them both installed on your machine and then compare them and decide for yourself if it's good enough or not good enough. Yeah, so again, it costs you nothing. It's very subjective. Only you can decide, and the only way you're going to be able to decide is to try it. And the risk or consequence of trying it is basically zero. You do not have to take Office off. You can install OpenOffice, LibreOffice, and Microsoft Office, and even the Google Office equivalents all simultaneously. They're all separate software. They have nothing to do with one another. And then you can decide. Now, what you decide, you know, if you want to come back and tell us you did that and what you thought, it's interesting, but it really doesn't help anybody else. Each individual has to decide for themselves. But, you know, out of curiosity, if you did that and you wanted to come back and not only tell us which you preferred, but tell us why, and then anybody else who has a similar value system could benefit from that. I don't know what the odds of that are, but James Prezi says $9.99 a month for Office 365 adds up over the course of 5 years. This is true. However, most offices, small businesses that are using Office, are using it in a way that generates their Office money. It's a part of their business. And so without it, they would have to find some other way to utilize the features of Microsoft Office in their business. So if it's something you're profiting, if it's a tool and you're profiting from that tool, it doesn't make sense that you would get that tool for free, right? The creator of the tool deserves some commission. Also, you're getting 5 years, let's say, of support. If you're talking about it adds up over 5 years, so does the cost of updating it and maintaining it. Who's paying for that, right? So the good news is, well, you have a subscription, you have support. You get free updates and upgrades to keep you safe and secure with the latest features. So it's not like you're paying and not getting anything back. In the chat, DNZYZZ wants to know what I can do if a laptop says operating system not found. That usually means that the internal storage drive has failed. So you would have to open the laptop, remove the failed hard drive or solid state drive and replace it, and then reinstall Windows again, and everything on that drive is gone. That's usually what that means. Patrick Rousson wants to know, what happens if your hard drive fails or you get a virus or ransomware and you weren't smart enough to have a backup? With regards to what, Patrick? With regards to reactivating product or with regards to recovering your data? Mike Broden says hello, joins us in the chat room. Braden in the chat room says, Carey, I'm looking into building a work PC used for mainly Illustrator or Photoshop and email. I'm trying to stay on the budget side. What would be a good CPU, GPU, or build? Questions like that would require about a 90-minute conversation in order for me to give you any information that would be helpful. Telling me you have a budget but not telling me what the budget is problem number one. Problem number two, of course, is getting more information about what requirements you have for the space the computer may take up, or whether you want a case window or lights, whether it needs Wi-Fi, and whether this is something you plan on upgrading regularly, or do you plan on just building it once and being done with it for a number of years. Things about the noise it makes, or where the priority is going to be with which software. In other words, which piece of software will be the most important to you. And then that piece of software, what version of it. And then we can look up, if I'm not already familiar, the software is designed to take care or to benefit primarily from what? Does that software benefit from more RAM or more cores, or from an NVIDIA video card, or so many different ways. It's about a 90-minute conversation that I have with most customers before I can even begin to offer any advice whatsoever. So sometimes people can ask a technical question like that in the chat. That's a valid question, but it's so complex and I require so much more information before I can start making any recommendations that it would monopolize the entire chat and the entire video for at least an hour, probably 90 minutes. So unfortunately, I can't really tell you the answer to your question for those reasons. Angel contributes $5 with a super chat contribution. Thank you, Angel. Zero Core wants to know if I've ever seen a blue screen of death error that says driver power failure. I'm asking because I just encountered this today. I have never seen that. What I would recommend is, if you see it again, take a picture of it of the error message with your phone, because there may be some other information on the screen that will help us. If you never see the error message again, then there's nothing to fix. So I wouldn't worry about it either way. Generally speaking, the first thing you always want to do when you're having a computer problem is to restart the computer. If the problem never happens again, it doesn't matter why. Knowing why is a complete waste of time. The reason we want to know why something is happening is so we can avoid it or correct it. But if it only happens once, there's nothing to avoid or correct. Marvin Jameson just became a member of the channel for 3 months. He says, I love this chat community. Hey, Marvin, thank you so much for becoming a member here. We're thrilled to have you. Chris Johnson says, greetings from a comfortable 78 degrees Fahrenheit in Albuquerque, New Mexico. I wish I was 78 degrees Fahrenheit. I'm standing here with the air conditioning running, and I need a mop. I'm sweating so much. And it's only going to get worse. Phoenix, July and August. Humid and hot. So as bad as July is, August is going to be worse. Once we get through August and we're in September, things start to get better. So yeah, this is the tough part of the year to get through for me. So I will live vicariously through those of you living in cooler locations around the globe and wish I was there. Jim Connolly says, what's your feeling on SGI computers? I don't know what SGI computers are. Chris Johnson says, I just built a PC for myself with a 2 terabyte NVMe drive and 32 gigs of RAM. I think that I don't need to have a page file since I have such a big solid state drive and a lot of RAM. Can I delete the page file? I don't think you should, Chris. What ends up happening with the paging file, and by the way, I have a quick tips video, it's under 10 minutes, that specifically mentions this. A lot of times users think that they can outsmart the engineers. And sometimes they end up with a false result that appears that everything's working better or faster after they've outsmarted the engineers by making a change from the default settings until they make a change. So let's say, for example, there's a new software update and it's more resource intensive, and now there's no paging file and your system crashes and you don't know why. And when you call for help, technical support and people that help are often not going to ask if you would have done something like that. So it'll be like one of these mysteries. No one will be able to fix it. And eventually you'll reinstall Windows and that will fix it because, of course, the paging file goes back to automatic. And you will falsely come to the conclusion that it was just Windows being unreliable, when in fact it was because you made that change in a year or whatever, and completely forgot, and nobody thought to check that because that's not something people do. If you want the best performance out of your computer, my advice is to leave the paging file alone. Leave it alone. Don't set it to a fixed size, don't move it to a different drive, and certainly do not disable it. Eventually, sooner or later, your system's going to crash. And the likelihood of you remembering that you did that to your system, to your paging file, that you disabled it, you likely won't remember that. And no one will be able to help you. You will have this mystery problem and nobody will have ever seen it. And they'll have you chasing your tail, doing all kinds of wasted time of registry keys and do this and do that and virus scan and check your memory, and all because you voluntarily made a change against the recommended settings that you completely forgot you did because it improved your performance. It's your computer, and if you want to do that, you go right ahead. But I can tell you, it's one of the worst mistakes people make. Absolutely one of the worst mistakes is to move away from those recommended settings. Leave your paging file alone. Not only that, but on an NVMe drive, your data storage is so fast, it really shouldn't make any noticeable improvement, whether it's using the paging file or not, apart from the fact that when and if it needs that extra area for paging file, the system doesn't crash. So you don't know that you avoided a crash by leaving it alone. That's a hard thing to prove to people, but the biggest issue that I see, and I've seen over the years, are people making modifications to Windows services, to the paging file, They read something online, they're trying to get more out of their system, and it appears to work. And it's much, much later, many, many months, maybe a year or 2 years later, that they have a problem. And nobody can figure out why. And it's because they did that change that's not normal, and they didn't tell anybody they did the change because they themselves forgot they did it. And that change is what caused that problem in the future. I've seen that a lot. If you want your system to be reliable, to have the most uptime, and to run at its best performance consistently, you leave those Windows services alone, and you leave your paging file alone, and you will get the best performance over time. Because the minute your system starts crashing and you have to diagnose it, what good your system performance is zero. You just went from something that was pretty darn good, made it a little teeny tiny bit better, and now it's completely zero until you get it figured out. So you've just, average out what your system performance is over time, including your zero system performance, and then average that out, and you actually slowed your machine down over, the average over time. So leave it alone if you want it to work. It's my best advice. You're not going to get any added performance by pushing any buttons or pressing any keys or moving the mouse, or you're not going to. If you want more performance, you got to pay for it. More RAM, faster storage, faster processor. That's it. Nothing else is going to make any significant difference apart from getting better hardware. So that's my suggestion for those reasons. I want to grab another Gatorade. This one's getting warm. We've got about 20 minutes left, so if you have a question for me, please put it in the chat room. We're going to wrap this up here in about 20 minutes. I really wanted to bring up today's live stream to test this camera configuration, get your feedback on the audio and the video quality. I know that I can still improve the camera a little bit more. The colors, it's really hard for me to know if people are seeing different colors on their screens, that it's not your screen. However, from what I'm looking at, from comparing it to being in the room and seeing what my preview looks like, colors look pretty dead on accurate to me. But that doesn't mean I can't brighten them or make them more vivid. So, and again, if a bunch of people are telling me the colors are a little off, I appreciate that. If one or two people are saying it and nobody else is saying it, I think it's those people. So I have to, gather this information, and the more information I have, the more it helps me regardless. So I appreciate the feedback. Case White wants to know, is RAM speed super important with Windows 11? My RAM is slower, but I have 64 gig instead of faster 16 gig. RAM speed is mostly an illusion. It's mostly an illusion. So, yeah, it's enthusiasts and hobbyists that look at all this technical minutia and make a big deal out of it. Most users will never see any difference in real-world practical applications. At the end of the day, does your computer feel fast to you? Are you trying to make it faster? How come? What do you do with your computer where making it 1 millisecond faster will make a difference, will make it worth paying the extra money for that RAM? I'm kind of curious if you understand the financial cost, your investment financially, as well as your real world return on investment for that. Most people absolutely cannot see any difference in RAM speed unless you're running some benchmark software that tells you. So you need to be happy with how your computer feels. There's no benchmark software that can measure how a computer feels. It requires a human being. So if your computer feels fast to you, leave it alone. If your computer is taking a longer time than you want it to do a certain task, let's talk about what that task is so we can identify if it's RAM related, storage related, or CPU related. Marvin Jameson just contributed $20. Right on. Well, thank you so much, Marvin. Midnight Club says, what to do when an NVMe SSD isn't showing up in an ASUS BIOS? Well, again, sometimes some of these questions involve a ton of detail. What NVMe drive specifically? What's the make and model? What ASUS motherboard? What's the make and model? Was the drive working and now it's stopped? Or is this something you just put in and it never worked? I mean, there's a ton of questions for that before I can begin to give you an option. There's no sort of all NVMe drives and all ASUS motherboards, you have to check this one thing. That never applies. That's more like if we were selling Apple computers where every computer was the same, then those kind of questions could be answered. The beauty of the PC world is that you can customize all the individual components, and of each component you have hundreds of variables to choose from. Which motherboard, which RAM, how much RAM, what size, how many sticks, what CPU, you know, what cooler, what power supply, what BIOS version, what operating system. As a result, certain problems exist with certain hardware configurations because there's hundreds of millions of variations. Whereas with Apple, it's just a couple, right? So for that reason, because of that freedom of choice, we have to get so much more information to understand what it is you're working with before we can even begin. And when I say we, I mean anybody that you're asking for help universally needs this information before they can give you any information back that would be of any meaningful use, to you. James Razzo with a $50 Super Chat contribution. Right on, James. Thank you so much. That's very generous. And Brandon Miller contributes $5. Brandon thinks the colors are muted compared to your other camera. I like the other camera, but it's a personal preference. Well, Brandon, I appreciate the feedback and the contribution. Like I said, I still have some more tuning to go with this camera. I can tell you your preferences about the other camera is that you're preferring an inferior camera. The only difference is I've had a lot of time to tune to get the best out of the inferior camera. So if the superior camera isn't giving me an image as good as the inferior camera, it's because the configuration and tuning of the superior camera is not yet there. Just so you know. Or you just prefer the softer look of a duller lens, or the processing, the artificial processing that happens in the inferior camera. And that's always possible, that tone may appeal to you. I honestly feel like I have more tuning to do on this XR705, but I feel like I'm pretty close. Yeah. Captain Blinsky thinks it's a Scotch washed out. Yeah, you know what? So when the colors look washed out, that's usually a problem with the not the white balance, but the gain. If the picture gets too much gain, the colors look a little faded. If it doesn't get enough gain, everything looks dark. And so, since the lighting in this room varies from afternoon to evening, like right now the sun is down, it's dark. I don't have any sunlight coming into this room, and it changes the amount of gain the camera needs to have. I haven't mastered the gain on this camera yet, so yeah, that's probably something I need to look into. So again, I appreciate the feedback on that. But compared to the last stream, this should be much more dialed in. Vern wants to know if I can try an increase in lighting. No, All the lights are on. It's the same lighting I've always had. There is absolutely no other light I could fit into the room. So we're dealing with the exact same lighting. Again, the issue is in the camera itself. One of the settings that I had, for example, needed to adjust was something called backlight. So I have backlight turned on all the cameras, but by default it's set to off, and I didn't realize that. And I couldn't figure out why the XR705, just something was off, and I was messing with white balance, and I was messing with gain and exposure. And anyway, I started going through the menu once I had some time when I wasn't live, and this isn't something I want to do live. I could sit down with it and really go through all the menu options. I saw the backlight, and I was like, oh yeah, I got to turn backlight on. And as soon as I did that, picture got much, much better. So it's stuff like that. That's what I'm referring to with fine-tuning this new camera. When I have it tuned correctly, if anything, I could turn some lights off, just so you know. This camera requires less light than the other ones. However, if it looks like it needs more light, that's in the camera. There's something in the camera I have to adjust. I don't know what it is, but again, I appreciate the feedback, and I'll when I have some time offline, I'll play around with that a little bit. I do think I can get a sharper image out of this camera. Like I've already said, I don't think it's dialed in just yet, and it may end up being something where I haven't exhausted yet. Trying myself, but if I can't seem to get there, I will certainly take Photo Ray up on his offer, because he's a professional photographer and he can help me identify and set the camera and explain the parts that I'm missing. So it's a little bit of a learning curve. William says he changed a setting on his monitor, and now my video looks much better to him. Yeah, so like I said, sometimes the monitor that you're watching it on is the issue. Martin says, to me the colors look absolutely normal, but some people prefer tone mapping to get exaggerated colors. Well, honestly, I prefer that. I prefer a little exaggerated, a little more saturation in the colors. But when I've done that with this camera, it has a negative effect, like on skin tone or the background. So like I said, I've got to do a little more fine tuning in the camera, but I think I'm moving in the right direction. AC Michael Dane joins us in the chat. Good to see you, Michael. Thanks for hanging out with us today. Jason said, Carey, the audio is much better. It's not clipping. In order to know the camera settings are good is to calibrate the monitor. I usually calibrate my monitor by eye. Well, again, you might look at something that you think is color correct, and I might look at it and disagree. Your monitor and your eyes come up with your conclusion. So you have to understand that universally that won't apply to everybody. In fact, it probably won't apply to most people. So information like that isn't really beneficial to me, but you can let me know, how it looks to you. And then what I do is I take all the data from people who say, hey, I think it looks great. Hey, I think this color looks washed out, or I think this looks something. If it's just one or two people, it doesn't matter. But if there's a number of people with a similar complaint, or they're all seeing the same, something looks a little faded or washed out. If there's enough people saying that, then absolutely, I know I need to look into it. Just so you know, right? So the only way I can determine that is by people telling me, not a specific person telling me. I need the more people who tell me what they're seeing, then I gauge from all that data, I can extrapolate from that what the majority are seeing. And if it's not a majority, if there's enough people, if there's a couple dozen people all saying the same thing, but nobody else is saying it out of hundreds of views, that's still worthy to me to look into. If it's just one person saying it, please understand that it wouldn't be wise for me to accommodate it to one person's particular viewpoint. So don't take it personally, but just know that the more information that I have from different viewers about their opinion on the video feed, the more it helps me to know what I need to adjust. Make sense? And of course, I'll play the video back later after YouTube processes this so I can see it for myself and I can judge. The YouTube processing on these 4K live streams is very, very long. So when the live stream is over, sometimes people say, hey, the 4K option went away, or hey, the chat room went away. For every live stream on YouTube, it has to be processed by YouTube servers before it becomes 4K and the chat room playback becomes available. So that, YouTube servers are processing hundreds of videos every minute. And if the video is 4K, that's a lot of data. If the video is 2 hours long at 4K, it's a lot of data. And then combined with the chat room, it can take up to 24 hours before the 4K option and chat room playback are available. So if you attempt to watch this video a few hours after it airs or a few minutes after it airs, fully expect that there will be no 4K option and there will be no chat room because YouTube is not finished processing the video. And YouTube won't tell you when it's done processing the video usually. So you just have to come back and check, wait a few hours and check again. If you don't want to keep checking every few hours, just come back tomorrow, and by then the processing should be finished and you should get the full 4K option and chat room playback every single time. Chris Johnson said, I see slightly muted colors in today's stream and I hear the audio perfectly. Again, thank you for the feedback, Chris. I also agree. I think the colors are the right colors, but they do seem a little muted to me. So I'm with you on that. I can immediately agree with what you're seeing and what I'm seeing. Now, I can't hear it, but when I play it back, again, when YouTube is done processing it, which will probably be, it'll probably take, again, several hours. I don't know how many. Depends how busy the YouTube servers are and how long this video is. But then I can go and see it in 4K and listen to the audio. And Randy says he's watching the stream on his phone and it looks fine. Yeah, I imagine, if you're watching on a smaller screen, the picture isn't so amplified, so a lot of the detail you cannot see. Lucky Reperk in the chat room wants to know, my PC is very slow with everything after not using it for 1 year. What should I do? I would need to know what your PC is. Not using a computer for a year doesn't affect its performance. That has nothing to do with performance. What affects your performance would be that something is not working. So we need to know, what is your PC? Is it something you bought at the store? Did you build it yourself? What processor? How much RAM? How much storage? What kind of storage? Questions like that. And then we can see if there's some different hardware you can buy, or if it's just cheaper to just buy a new computer. If everything is low, that would explain the performance. Ian Scott Stewart wants to know if Windows 10 Pro automatically turns on the V Ethernet. What is VE? I don't know what that is. So I'm going to say no, since I've never heard of V Ethernet. If anybody knows what Ian is referring to, feel free to answer it in the chat, because I don't know what that is. Lone Wolf wants to know if you have two PCI Express by 16 slots, and one is by 8, and you slot two graphics cards in both, and one audio card in the by 8 slot, and an M.2 shares PCI lanes on the X8, can that cause system-wide slowness? Depends on the CPU. Yes, if you have a computer that hasn't been turned on in a year, is probably doing a ton of Windows updates in the background that might be affecting your performance. That's a good point. You could certainly go to Windows Update and force those updates manually and let them go ahead and download and install and reboot, and keep repeating that until there are no more updates available. See if that resolves any performance issues. All right, guys, I think I am going to wrap it up for tonight. Like I said, I really just wanted to test today's stream. I'm still playing with the bit rate a little bit to make sure that it's not too high, that the upload bandwidth requirement to broadcast in 4K is much, much higher than 1080. And so what I'm trying to do is figure out the upload bandwidth that I have, where its limit is. Right now we're at about 17 megs per second, which I think is pretty good. I don't know if going to 20 would really improve the picture or not, or would result in more drop frames and the connection not being as solid. So I still have to play around a little bit with that, but that's not my first concern, because the 17 megs per second seems to be running solidly. My first concern is, of course, the audio and video quality and getting those colors to look right. So the stuttering and the frame rate issue is resolved. The brightness issue I have is resolved. And at this point, at least I'm a lot closer than where I was with the new camera. I needed to get to where the old cameras were, and then bump it up from there. So the camera right now today may be on full automatic settings, because I played around with it and made some adjustments, and then when I went back to automatic, everything looked good. When I had it on automatic, it didn't look good. So I don't know why that changed. Obviously, I always want to go to manual settings and dial it in. So I think this is what it looks like with everything on full auto, which is how it should work when the backlight is turned on and the other features in the menu are turned on. Then the automatic settings are much more accurate. But again, if I dial it in manually, I should be able to do far, far better. So I think that's why we're seeing what we're seeing today. Well, thank you so much for everybody who's contributed during today's broadcast, and for the questions, for participating in today's show. Always, every Friday at 1 o'clock, I am live, typically doing a computer build. It's 1 o'clock Pacific time, and throughout the week, if I have time, I will broadcast as my schedule permits. I have customers call me. As I said, I'm a working computer tech, so I'm trying to do that job as my primary job, and YouTube is sort of a secondary job. Depending on how busy things get in my actual career, determines how much time I have to make videos Monday through Thursday. I try to avoid videos on weekends. I'm forcing myself to take a little time off. I will work myself to death. So Saturday and Sunday, generally, I do not broadcast. I think I should be broadcasting from Studio A the first week of August. There should be at least one video. So for those of you missing the dogs in Studio A, you can look forward to that. I'll have more information once I have date and time nailed down. And otherwise, you always know Fridays at 1 o'clock Pacific time, I am live. Other than that, I go live, as I mentioned, as time permits, and that's where the notifications help. You don't need notifications to know that I'm going to be live Friday at 1 o'clock Pacific. That's tried and true. It's been that way for a couple of years now. So at the very least, you know you can catch me then and join in the live chat every Friday, 1 o'clock Pacific. The links for the Windows and Office software keys with a significant discount using the coupon code CAREY, that's in my video notes. You can still get 30% off RoboForm anytime. Link is in the notes. All the tools and equipment I use are all in my Amazon store. Link is in the notes. And be sure and please read the video notes. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you all again very, very soon. Until then, bye for now.